Shane, well done. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, you and Logan have done a very strong work today. Maybe just starting here, how would you, because I hear you using the word creativity in a few ways, so maybe just for us, how would you define, and I know it's hard to define, but how would you define creativity? The thing that we're not.
I think I would piggyback off of an idea that I heard from a different speaker a while ago, and the point he said that the process of creativity, as he defined it, was having coming up with original ideas that have value. So I guess that's how I would mostly define it. I know there are exceptions to that, but I think that's a pretty good definition with something so like the wind. It's like almost inexplainable. I think that's the closest definition I could probably give right now.
That's good. Follow up? Quick follow up. So, and then just to add more context, you would say that it is someone's disposition to creativity is a biological, like a right-brained, so to speak, kind of thing, something that, or is it a personality or?
I think that like being right-brained or left-brained, those things, they aren't our personality, but they are what makes up parts of our personalities. They're not the thing itself, but they are kind of one of the things that develop who we are. It's not like a physical trait, it's a God-given talent. Okay. And many people are given many different talents, but I think that everyone has at least a range of creativity that they use differently.
Okay, thank you.
Great job. You're speaking to the choir here. You are such a creative young man. It's a joy to read your work. One of the things that you had talked about during your thesis was the pyramid hierarchy with math and sciences, humanities in the center, and then the arts on the bottom. Can you give us a form or a model? Would you keep that triangular, or how would you structure the education system?
Oh boy.
To be honest, I don't have a definite answer for that. I'm not really skilled as like a school advisor. I don't know how I would go about like structuring each and every class, but I would try and form something on the guidelines, not of a pyramid, but kind of as like just like a flat surface, you know. These things should be brought up together and they should work with one another. We shouldn't have, because right now, most schools today, you sit in a class for 6 to 7 hours with math, science, history, literature, and then, more logically inclined students too, but as well as people like me, the only time you really have for anything of a relief is either lunch or that little 45-minute period at the end of the day, which are electives. And that's where all of our arts are always set into, in these little last segments of time, you know? And yeah, I would try and even out the playing field, as it were.
Good.
Caro?
Yeah. First of all, amazing job. Really great speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I have two questions. I hear you on all of this, and I definitely agree with you on so many things. But what kind of career would one have to pursue in order to really change the system and reform education? So if somebody's really inspired by you, and like you said, well, I don't know how to do it, right? What kind of career do you think a person might pursue in wanting to change this entire education system? Do you think, I guess, in other words, do you think it's a political thing, or it's a education reform? You know, what do you think?
I think that I mean, I don't know exactly how the power system of how teachers interact with the administrators and how they react to like who's in charge of who, per se, that kind of hierarchy of who's in charge of changing things and how many people you'd have to go through to get something done. But I think that in my eyes, from what I can guess, it would probably be political, mostly, just because I feel like they're always in charge of everything in the end, you know? And I think that you could be a teacher or an administrator and really push for this. But in the end, I think you'd have to present that to someone else. And I think it's a majority effort, I think, for political people in improving the education field, but it's also all of our jobs, because this whole thing is a circle, you know? You educate students in a way that makes them prepared for a certain job force. They're gonna go into that job force and they're gonna change things about our society, whichever way. And because of that, our society is gonna have different needs, and those needs are gonna ask schools to try and teach students different things so that we can meet those needs for the next generation. So we have to start, I think, at the top, so that when it comes full circle, we have a completely different society where the arts and the academics are seen as equals, you know? Where they're not, yeah.
Okay, good. Do you have time for
I don't know if I answered
some
your
other
question.
I'm going to take a break and ask a couple of questions. They are flooding in. They were flooding in the middle of your speech as well, and so I'm going to do my best.
Yikes.
I ask everybody for their patience. If I don't get to your question, it is because I don't like you. No, I'm just kidding. It is because we simply don't have enough time. Feel free to ask him afterwards more. Okay, right. There's a lot. Okay, first of all, Shane, excellent job. You talked a lot about left brain, right brain, how we sort of dichotomized these and separated these, and I'm truncating maybe 4 or 5 different texts that all have asked the same thing.
Okay.
How do we integrate these things, right, like creativity with maybe more hard sciences, in a way that doesn't continue to enforce their separation? Does that make sense? How do we do it in a way that doesn't keep saying there's artsy kids, there's math kids, and they're always going to kind of fail at the other thing? It seems kind of, to do that is kind of the doom that you've struggled with, is what you're telling us. How do we integrate these things meaningfully and not ensure that dichotomy?
Let me try and remember the first thing you just said.
You did a great job. That was the first thing I said.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I think it's kind of the same thing as what I said before. It's like a loop. To make a change, we kind of have to change the way that we think about the issue. And I think part of the reason is that we've always been used to, it's kind of like different diets and stuff. You've always been used to like a certain way of eating. You eat different things, and then things like the mind diet and veganism are ways that kind of try and push us out of that cultured mindset of how things should be done. And it starts to get you to think for yourself of what is actually right. So I think we kind of have to stop thinking of it as a left-brained and a right-brained. I don't think we should like ignore that concept at all. But I think we should stop seeing them as opposites and start seeing them as like two sides of the same coin. You know, they're contributors to each other. As I said, math should relate to art, and art should justify the need to do that math. Scientists are really creative. Scientists and artists are really similar in the way that they look at the way things are and they try and ask themselves, you know, what's hiding there? Is there more to discover? And how do I find that? They just do it in different ways.
Somebody asks a clarifying question. Should art be incorporated into all classes like maybe Christianity and the Bible are at Trinity, right? Or are you arguing for just more people taking more distinct art classes?
I don't want to be the guy again, but in a way, both. But at the same time, I think that we should integrate the arts a little more into our, like, more standardized classes. As I said before, they should work together.
I'm going to ask one more and then I'll go back to the judges. Someone wants to know, how in allowing children and adults that are in high school still, how do we allow students to be creative, and yet even in those classes which are particularly creative, and I think of some of our conversations, Sherry, this person's wondering, how do we ensure excellence in terms of their performance in those creative classes?
That's a good point.
Could you rephrase that?
So in those creative arts classes, how do we go about measuring their excellence or their mistakes or their failures in a way that honors their creativity in those art classes, and yet also respects their creativity? How do we grade an art class?
Well, I mean, as I said in my speech, I don't mean to mistake creativity for ignorance or inexperience. Like, if you, like, are just going off of what the lesson is doing and be like, oh, I'm just trying to be creative, then that's kind of like hijacking that kind of terminology for your own gain. Art classes, as Ms. First knows, they do have things that we have to get done. There is a lesson to be learned, and there are many ways to, like, get to that lesson, and there are many ways to be creative, but it shouldn't be like an obnoxious trying to, like, hijack the rules, you know. I don't know if I answered that, but.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to turn it back over to judges to ask a few questions.
I just have, so working in what we have now, the confines within what we have, do you think that maybe, how would I start in different way? So are we adding like creative classes? Are you wanting an individualistic approach to adjust to what each kid shows in talent? Or should a parent say, well, my kid Shane is really artistically talented, maybe I'll send him to a school where they focus more on that? Working within the confines of now.
Yeah. I know that we don't necessarily have the time and money to be able to cater to each student individually in a class. But there are ways that we can, I'd have to explore a little more, given a little more time to figure out exactly what we could do strategically in schools to make that happen. But we can find ways to, like, adhere to all children in the class, you know, just like, and I don't think, what was the last part of your question? Sorry?
I was saying if a parent can identify their child's particular talent,
yes.
should they then kind of,
Take them out?
well, put them in a
And, like,
school
put
that
them in-
focuses more on that particular talent?
Yes and no. I don't think that, I'm very gray on a lot of things. I don't think that we should, like, take kids out of high school and put them in a school that's, like, just towards the arts, because I think that would be just as bad as, or maybe even worse, to, like, what we're trying to do right now is where it's, like, mostly logical. I think it'd be just like a flipped bad thing. I think that focusing in on a specific skill is what college is for. You know, middle school and high school, I feel like, are those defining ages in a person's life when they're still trying to figure out who they are. And what I'm trying to say is that we should give them equal emphasis on all of those areas of what a person might be interested in, so then they can fully try and figure out what they want to do when they get to college.
Good answer.
Shane, another texted question from the audience. Do you believe that there should be federal laws enforcing greater arts curriculum?
Like lethal gun violence?
I'll text them back and let you know. No, federal mandates, federal laws saying more. Are you saying in a sort of
You should be in
grassroots
science.
I'm not sure that was maybe what they meant, but
That might not be how laws work.
So federal.
Should there be federal laws enforcing greater arts education? If so, what kinds of federal mandates?
Again, I don't know how the federal and political structure works exactly in this area, but I don't think it needs to be like set laws or anything. Like other things, like people don't force you to eat a certain way, you know, but it starts with changing the system. And I think if the system changes when we come for a circle, we won't need to enforce anything, if that makes sense.
No, I think we've been, these questions have been in kind of the nitty gritty of the praxis, which is good. But I wanted to point out and just say, I love the ending of your your thesis. It was kind of this beautiful doxology about God and his creativity and making us as sub-creators, and that's beautiful. And it seems to me to point towards a different end for education, and I wanted to open up to you. What, in your mind, as you're looking at the Industrial Revolution model, where I think you described it well, you have buckets of children moving through it, and we're just sort of adding things on. It has a particular end, right? It has this is what we're educating kids for.
Yeah,
to
it's made for
work in the Ford factory or whatever you mentioned. In your mind, then, what is the good? What is the best end for education?
Like the ideal reason
Purpose.
for education.
Right, the purpose. Why are you in school? Why are you graduating on Friday?
I believe the purpose.
Could his mom and dad leave the room for a second?
From what I can gather by myself, the purpose of education and the purpose of teachers are to incite learning and try and ignite curiosity within students. You want to students are there to learn, and they're there to try and kind of find out who they are and where they will, like what are they going to do in this world? And you're trying to give them the knowledge and the learning to be able to adequately function in the world. And you're trying to incite and spark curiosity within students. If you can get students to be curious about a subject, then they are going to start to learn without you. Children, I think in general, are very good at learning. They'll do it on their own. Children develop by learning new things all the time. That's how we learn to read and walk. And I think that we just kind of need to spark I've said it so much. We need to spark curiosity within students and try and incite them to want to learn.
With that, we are unfortunately out of time for this formal question asking. But again, there were so many questions. I had 2 sheets, and there's still more coming in, which is great. Please, all of you, don't forget those questions. Let those questions turn into deep conversations. Round of applause, Shane. You both.